Good morning, everyone, and welcome to
Oh,
Coffee and
sorry.
Conversations, a discussion with leading influencers, policymakers, and thought leaders shaping the economic future of the Bronx. This morning, we welcome the Honorable Rafael Salamanca, Chair of the Land Use Committee of the New York City Council. The program will begin in approximately 2 minutes. As a reminder, this program is being recorded and will be shared with all participants at the conclusion of the program. This program is also being shared on social media via Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook Live. Thank you.
Is a councilman on, Mike?
I don't see him on yet. I think they were having an issue with the link on his end.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Coffee and Conversations, a discussion with leading influencers, policymakers, and thought leaders shaping the economic future of the Bronx. This morning, we are happy to have the Honorable Rafael Salamanca, the Chair of the Land Use Committee for the New York City Council, and a born and bred friend of the Bronx. We are very excited to have him here today to speak about economic development in the Bronx, land use activities in the Bronx, and just the general economic future of our borough. Before we continue on to the conversation and welcome the council member formally, I want to turn the program over to Lisa Soren, the president of the Bronx Chamber of Commerce, for welcoming remarks. Lisa?
Okay, after all this time, I still can't get used to the mute button. Good morning, one and all. Good morning, councilmen. You know, this series is super important as we're heading into the end of the year. Elections are coming up in a couple of weeks. Next year, we're seeing more elections. So these type of conversations are amazing. Councilman, you've been a huge partner to the chamber for many years. And for that, we thank you. So I'm really looking forward to listening to more of what's going on with the land use. We know there's been a lot of conversation about changes in zoning across our borough, housing issues, you know, so in all of this impacts our economic development in the borough. And I'm curious just to know more about it. I want to thank everybody who's taken the time this morning to join us. And Mike, of course, thank you for always putting these things together that are so important.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And thank you, council member, for joining us today. And before we turn the floor over to you, I just want to lay the table for folks who are joining us this morning. We have in the Zoom room a lot of members of the board of directors for the Bronx Chamber of Commerce. We're also being joined via Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook Live. And a recording of our conversation will be shared out to the entire Bronx Chamber of Commerce at the conclusion of the program. So, council member, thank you so much for joining us today. I really, really appreciate your leadership in the Bronx. And before we get into it, I just want to give our friends who are watching on social media and in Zoom an idea of who you are and how you got here. I think that's really important. So for those of you who are joining us, Councilmember Salamanca is from the 17th District of the New York City Council. He represents the South Bronx, but he also serves as the chair of the Land Use Committee, which is arguably the first or second most powerful committee in the City Council. I don't want to start a fight with Justin Brannon on this, who chairs the Finance Committee, but it's definitely a very impactful committee. Councilmember Salamanca is the son of first-generation Puerto Rican immigrants. He grew up in the Bronx, and he began his work in the Bronx on the ground, working with healthcare agencies and later as the district manager for Bronx Community Board 2, where he served for nearly 6 years. Additionally, he was the president of the 41st Precinct Community Council, And he has done so much in terms of driving capital investment into his district. I think to date, my numbers may be just a little off, but he's driven more than $52 million in capital investments into the district. But that's realized nearly $1 billion in economic development impact for his district and the entire South Bronx. He's also been leading the uphill battle of New York City zoning and understanding, how we can rezone our city and how we can move forward on mission-driven development projects that truly impact the community in a positive way. So it is a pleasure to welcome a friend of the Bronx, a friend of New York City, Councilmember Rafael Salamanca, to speak a little bit about himself and a little bit about his work, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers in the chat box. It will be monitored, so if you have a question for the council member, put it in the chat box and we'll bring it up to the floor. We'll also be monitoring questions that come in on our social media platforms. So Councilmember Salamanca, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Madam President, Lisa Serene and Michael Brady for having me. I'm excited to be here today. I'll go straight to it because I'm interested in getting questions from the panels. I'm Rafael Salamanca Jr. I'm the council member for the South Bronx 17th Council District. It's such a great honor for me to represent my community that I was born and raised in, and that I'm currently raising my family in here in the South Bronx. I never left my community. Michael, you summed it up with my bio. I started working when I was 19 years old, I started working for an organization called Urban Health Plan. Most of that it was called La Clínica San Juan, under the leadership of Paloma Hernandez and Dr. Izquierdo. I was there for about 7.5 years. And then I went on to work for an organization called Community Healthcare Network. I was the director of their Brooklyn facility in Williamsburg. I was there for about 3.5 years. But in that time, I've always stayed committed in ensuring that I participated in community events as a member of the local community board, where Lisa Serene was also a member of community board too for many years. In 2010, there was a vacancy for district manager. I put in my resume. I was chosen by the board to be the district manager. And in 5.5 years that I was there, my focus was more in terms of cleaning up the Hunts Point community, addressing the prostitution, addressing the violence, and also working with the local precinct to ensure that there's a better relationship between the community and the local precinct. And that's how I also became the president of the 4-1 Precinct Council. And in 2016, there was a vacancy for the 17th Council District, the seat that I currently hold. And I won that special election. And in the time that I've been in the council, I've approved over 8,000 units of 100% affordable housing in my council district alone. Michael, I have to change my bio because I've actually, in this almost 7 years that I've been in office, I brought in a little over $200 million in capital dollars alone.
I knew I was wrong on that. I knew it.
In my council district alone. I'm currently serving my last term in the council. I've been land use chair. It's going to be now for about 5 years. It's been challenging, especially with the new class of members. We have 32 new members, and so many of them, they have to get educated in terms of how the systems work in the council. Right now we have a housing crisis. We have record high individuals that are living in homeless shelters. Not to mention, you compound that with the asylum seekers that are here in the city of New York. And quite frankly, we just don't have enough housing. And so my focus has been working with the speaker, Adrian Adams, is how to get members to a yes on these housing projects. Voting no is no longer an option. We're never, as someone who's negotiated many projects, you're never going to get 100% of what you're asking for. But that is the art of negotiating. Well, what are your needs? What's best? How can we negotiate a project that's best for your community so that we can address the housing crisis that's happening in every neighborhood throughout the city of New York? And with that, I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm open to get questions from the panel.
Thank you so much, Council Member. And I will punt it over to Lisa Soren for the opening questions. And then again, for folks who are joining us, please put your question in the chat box, both on the Zoom chat, Twitter DMs, or in the Instagram or Facebook Live. We really appreciate your input. So Lisa, why don't you kick us off? You're muted, by the way.
Bear with me 1 second, I'm sorry. So a few questions with the housing that's going on in the land use in general. And I lost my train of thought. It's that type of morning. What type of conversations moving forward? We know that we're headed into election year for next year for city council. What are the platforms that are sitting? There's a lot of movement going on at city council right now. And I'm just wondering where priorities stand because of all the new members. You know, what's a conversation? What should businesses be expecting coming from council?
Well, in terms of housing, you know, we've been successful, I would say, to say the least, in working with new members where housing in their communities, there is this NIMBYism where not in my backyard. You know, and you saw that when we voted on the project in Drosnik houses. You know, it happened in Brooklyn as well with Council Member Hudson. But what was interesting, each project is unique, to say the least. What was interesting, what occurred in Brooklyn on Atlantic Avenue was that there were certain needs that were needed there. The infrastructure was needed. The roads needed, there needed to be a study on improving safety in those roads. And the councilwoman, Crystal Hudson, she was successful in adding more affordable housing to that particular project, even though there was going to be a good amount of market rate housing that was there. But the council member understood the needs of what the city as a whole needs in terms of housing. And so she was able to get deep affordability, but with that, she got a big package of community benefits that community will extremely benefit from. The project here in Drosnik houses, you know, there was a lot of not in my backyard, but what that community needed to understand was that there are members of that particular community who are seeking housing. There are members in that particular community who are in the homeless shelter and want to go back to their communities and live with their families there. And when you look at the overall, in the last 10 years, communities that have done their fair share, that particular community was last on the list, where they built about 50 something units of affordable housing. And when you look at Staten Island, they build more affordable housing. You say to yourself, how is that even possible? You know, my council member, my colleague, he's a Republican, Borelli, has approved more affordable housing there than a Democratic, a Democratic council district. And so I know that it was tough for Council Member Velasquez, that project, because there was big community oppositions and there were commitments and that were made from the very beginning. You know, something that I tell my colleagues is don't make any promises in the very beginning. You don't know what's going to happen in the negotiations, and you may have to change your mind or change your thought process because you want to do the right thing for your community and the city. And there can be a reverse reaction towards that. Also, you know, with the new members, you know, there's a lot of excitement from the members. When we're talking about economic development, I sit in that committee as well. And, you know, it's chaired by Council Member Amanda Farias. I have many conversations with the councilwoman. I'm proud to sit in that committee because I represent Hunts Point, which has the world's biggest markets. And it's an economic engine there. You know, my dad worked in the Hunts Point market for 18 years. That's how we survived. That's how food was placed on the table. That's how I got my health care. My mom got her health care, and so did my sister. And they're good paying union jobs. And those are the type of jobs that we need to protect. And so as the representative of that area, and also as a member of the Economic Development Committee, you know, I'm working hand in hand with the markets on ensuring that they're we're getting the funding that they need so that we can build a new facility for the produce market. I've been able to bring over $12 million to the meat market for the infrastructure. The building is falling apart. And so we need to do our part ensuring that they have the resources necessary, because 70% of our food comes from these markets. I've invested millions of dollars in the fish market, the Fulton Fish Market that's in Hunts Point, and I'm working hand in hand with organizations and companies like Baldors, who hires hundreds of local individuals and pays them good paying jobs. And so that has been my focus, to say the least, in this new term that I'm in this past 10 months.
Wow, I have to say congratulations. That's amazing with everything that's going on. And Phil Grant, who is the CEO for the Hunts Point Market, Produce Market, sits on our board, and he has been a true advocate to figure out how to grow and bring more small businesses. And we'll actually be having big discussions around that. And as soon as those begin, of course, we will reach out to you, because you're absolutely right. The economic engine there and bringing in more smaller businesses, I think would be amazing for that area. Mike, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Councilmember Salamanca. I think particularly with the Hunts Point markets, it's really important that folks both that are watching today, but just folks in general, understand that it's more than just one market, right? There are several elements of the Hunts Point area that go to ensuring that New York City is fed, that our restaurants have a food supply, that our grocers have a food supply. And Councilmember, I just want to thank you for your investments in Hunts Point, because it really is something that is very deserving and necessary for our city. So on to some other items, and then we'll go into some of the conversations in the chat box. The mayor's office recently came out with their City of Yes text amendments that look to strengthen small businesses, look to strengthen our commercial corridors, and fast track some elements of land use and zoning. Can you speak to a couple of those changes and where you might be hopeful, or where you might think maybe we need to slow down the process on this part, or anything within those text amendment packages that you think are things that we should just be aware of?
Yeah, at the moment, my office in the land use division, we're digesting this just homes package that the mayor has released for the businesses. I know something that we're focusing on right now is the outside dining area. There's a text amendment and there's a bill that's being drafted in terms of making it permanent and who has jurisdiction and oversight over it, whether it should be the Department of Consumer Affairs or the Department of Transportation. I personally think that it should stay with the Department of Transportation. They are the city streets, sidewalks, and the roadways belong under the jurisdiction of the Department of Transportation. I think Consumer Affairs just has too much on their plates right now. They should focus more on the enforcement of the street vendors that are selling in bids that are competing with businesses that are paying rent and paying taxes. And so I'm sorry, I don't have a direct answer for you on the mayor's plan, but just know that the land use division is actively reading it and digesting it so that we can respond back.
No worries. And here's a fun question that's coming to us from
Sorry,
Facebook.
Mike, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, absolutely.
Councilman, you hit on a super important point with the outdoor dining. I'm not sure why the idea came up to move it into the Department of Consumer Affairs and Workers Protection, because I find that agency is more punitive than anything else. And we haven't gotten to a point where even decided on what those modules should look like in outdoor dining. How can we assist you and those who understand the importance of keeping it under the Department of Transportation, especially while we're figuring out what the long-term, what it'll look like long-term with the outdoor dining? How can we as an institution assist you in that direction?
I think there's going to be a hearing coming up on this, and I think it's important that your organization just follow it, speak to your local members, participate in the hearing. I would recommend, if you cannot physically come to City Hall, they still have a hybrid option for individuals that want to participate in the hearing. And it gives you an opportunity for you to give your comments. After the hearing, the way this works is there's a hearing after the hearing, and then there is intense negotiations that happen. And that does not mean that because as a city council, we're having these conversations, doesn't mean that the chambers, not just the Bronx, but all chambers throughout the city of New York cannot participate in those conversations with their members. And honestly, you are the experts. Unless you are a business owner or a restaurant owner, we lean on to the businesses to dictate to us what's actually happening on the ground. Because it is the businesses who are dealing with these agencies and dealing with these inspectors, and so we depend on you to feed us real live information so that we can collectively make the right decision as a whole.
Thank you. That was super. I'm grateful for that answer.
Absolutely. And as an organization that manages 2 of the Bronx's 6 open streets, we are eager to get feedback from folks on the ground. So I believe that Julius, or a member of the chamber team, is actually putting contact information in the chat box. If you have any information about open streets that you'd like to pass along, please send it to that email so we can inform our testimony. This has been a very heavy, we jumped right in and it was like very heavy with like text amendments and redevelopment projects. Councilmember, there's a fun question coming in from Facebook. Maybe not fun if you haven't recovered from the Yankee loss over the weekend, but are you hopeful about next Yankees, the next season starting in April? And what would you have for advice for the Yankees?
First, they have to sign Aaron Judge. We need to keep Aaron Judge, and I think the Yankees have to focus on maybe bringing in more pitching, especially the closers. It was disappointing to see the Yankees lose, especially to Houston in a sweep. And so, I'm a big Yankee fan. So is my family. So is my son. But I think they had a great season, and I'm just happy to have been able to witness. Via my TV, witness Aaron Judge beat the home run record. These are things that do not happen in individuals' lifetimes, and just to be able to share that moment with my son was very special.
Awesome. And just for folks, every time the Yankees played a playoff game at home, the city of New York netted about $19 million in economic development. So it's always great when the Yankees are in the playoffs, and that's largely due to the support of Councilmember Salamanca, and we're very happy about that. So now on to some more serious things. We had to lighten up the mood a little bit. It was getting not coffee ready. This was cocktail conversation, but Councilmember, there are a lot of redevelopment projects that are happening in the Bronx, from the Kingsbridge Armory, Hunts Point, the development of life sciences centers. What do you think would be, impactful? Where should our city be putting our resources and our focus on economic development, particularly in the Bronx? I know that Brooklyn gets a lot of play, but I think there are a lot of projects happening in the Bronx. And what do you think would be maybe the top 2 most transformational development projects that deserve our attention as a borough?
I mean, look, there's been conversations, at least since I've been involved in government for over a decade, on the transformation of the Kingsbridge Armory. I visited the Armory over the summer, and I was just taken back by how big that building is. If you haven't been there, I mean, you should see. I don't know if they give tours. I think we went down almost 5 to 7 stories down. But the building is in disrepair. I heard various numbers in terms of really uplifting that building, anywhere between 500 million to $1 billion. That building right now, the bottom 2 to 3 floors are just flooded with water. And it's too bad because it's a beautiful facility. But the city is still, the EDC has oversight, has ownership of the building. And so I know that the main floor, at the moment, at least when I went over the summer, they were leasing it out for movie studios. They were utilizing it. So I think when we're talking about in terms of the Bronx, revitalizing the Kingsbridge Army, the city can't do it alone. It has to be, there needs to be federal and state partners. We need federal dollars to really revitalize the Kingsbridge Army. And it has so much potential in terms of the economy, the amount of jobs that it can bring. Number one, construction jobs. If they put the money, the funding so that we can bring it back to life. Then after that, figuring out what exactly the community would like to see in that facility. I see community space, programming, opportunities for non-for-profits, opportunities for for-profits, businesses to move in. I think that building is big enough so that all different career avenues have an opportunity to participate there. In terms of, I'm a land use chair, so 90% of my time, my conversations are about development, changing the zonings. There are many opportunities in terms of building construction jobs, building construction will create jobs. And I know that construction jobs, many view them as temporary jobs, right? Construction is done, they move on to the next one, but it stimulates the economy. Those construction workers have to eat, so they go to the bodegas, they go to the restaurants, they take Ubers, they take the train, they ride bike there. They participate in the economy. And then once you build that facility, whether it's a commercial building or it's a residential building, you get the permanent jobs, the maintenance jobs that are there, but then you get the individuals that live there that really spice up the economy. And so I think that there are many opportunities. The Bronx is ripe right now because land is much cheaper than it is in the outer boroughs. But ultimately, I'm also a community guy from the community board. It's important that we build with the community so that and then there must be input for the community. That is how you thrive as a community.
That's great. And I think that we're very hopeful about the future of the Bronx and our just general economic development. So on to some questions. There's a lot of chatter in the chat box about affordable housing. And I know that just recently, one of the largest affordable housing developments was completed. The current phases were completed at La Central, A and B, bringing on some new affordable housing. Can you just speak to, how do we balance the concept of affordable housing, particularly in areas, I'm very familiar with the South Bronx. So in areas that have a high density of low income housing, how we balance the ratios of what we classify as affordable. And then, how do we take that formula? I know that you've said often, no community is cookie cutter, but how do we take that formula and then apply it to an area like Throgs Neck? And balance out the development of the Bronx and New York City so it benefits everyone in the community.
Yeah, I'm excited about that project. That's one of La Central was the first big ULURP land use application that I voted on in 2016 when I first got elected. Almost 1,000 units of 100% affordable housing. And we brought in the Y, which opened up this week. And we're going to do the ribbon cutting on Thursday. I actually was at the Y on Sunday with my family and we signed up, we registered, us three. And so, see, the method that I use for La Central, and this is the method that I use when I'm approving projects in my district, is I use the mixed income model. I represent an extremely low income community. So I'm also the author of what's called a 15% homeless set aside. And so what that bill does, and I'll bring it all together. What that bill does is that it requires every development that's getting city funding, even if it's $1, any building that has over 40 units, 15% of those units, 15% of those units have to be set aside for homeless families, preferably families from that immediate community. And the developer and DHS and HPD work together to make that a reality. And then I move on to my extremely low income, which is the 30% AMI. For families in an extremely low income. So their units in La Central, if you fit under that criteria, where your rent would average anywhere between $300 to $500 a month. I wanted to ensure that I had that opportunity for residents in my community. And then we move on with different areas of the AMI. I think La Central goes up to 110 or 120% of the area median income. And the reason that I use that model is because not everyone that lives in the South Bronx is low income. right? You have many households where you have mom and dad. Dad is making 60,000, mom is making 60,000. That's $120,000 a year, you know. But they're living in a walk-up apartment, you know, and their building is falling apart. Why can't they too, even though they're making $120,000, live in beautiful units such as La Central? So my method has been, in this time that I've been in the council, has been ensuring that I am setting aside units for homeless families, the more vulnerable, preferably those that live in my community or come from the community, and then the mixed income model, to ensuring that different levels of incomes have access to these units. That's one level. Now, senior housing, you know, as healthcare is improving, and you know, in medicine, you know, it's getting better in terms of technology that we have. People are living longer, and communities such as mine, you have individuals that have been here for 50, 60 years. They're living in apartments where they have 2 and 3 bedroom units, and they're living on their own. Well, why not build senior housing, 1 bedroom or studio apartment, where these seniors have an opportunity to move in, an apartment that's more conducive to their needs. All right, there may be a disability or something, right? We're building differently, and open up those 2 and 3 bedroom apartments for families that have larger families. And so the model of the way we're building, the way we're addressing housing is constantly changing, and you have to be with the times to ensure that you are building conducive to what the needs are in the communities. And that's exactly what I'm doing in the South Bronx.
Great, thank you. There's a question in the chat box, and it's a little politically sensitive, so I just want to preface it by that. I think it involves member deference, and you know, that's been a thing and that we've heard over and over again for a long time in the council, that, you know, the home rule, a local council member should have way because they're closest to the community, and this is particularly in regards to the Throgs Neck issue, and Councilmember Velasquez's vote. She had been against the project, but then after, you know, intense advocacy by some members and some other officials from City Hall, that she voted to allow the project move forward. So this question, I think, speaks to member deference and, you know, the overall goal of communities, but then the larger goal of New York City. You know, how do you think that member deference has evolved? And, you know, what do you think is appropriate pressure to put on a member to have your voices heard?
Yeah. So look, this is the model that when I became land use chair 4 years ago, Speaker Corey Johnson told me, and then the same model that Adrian Adams told me. We believe in member deference. We believe that members know what's best for their communities. They live there. They're the representative of their communities. But that does not mean that members have veto power. Let me say that again. We believe in member deference, but that does not mean that members have veto power. And what do I mean by that? When a member wants to stop a project, they should be able to elaborate and explain to their colleagues why this project should not move forward. And 99% of the time, we side with the member because they're giving an exact reason. But just saying no because I don't want the project is not a valid reason why we should just kill a project. Now I'll give you an example. The blood bank. I'm sorry, the blood center. We voted on that last November. Councilmember Kalos was vehemently opposed to that project. And, you know, well, we said, well, Ben, explain to us why you want no. Well, the reasoning for it was there were concerns about the shadows, that there was going to be shadows in one particular neighborhood, a very wealthy community. And so what the council did is we sat back and we figured out, well, what is the effect? If we kill this project, how would this affect the city, this community, and the city as a whole? And, you know, we're talking about healthcare. The blood center, you know, it takes care of 90% of our blood, you know, when in the city of New York. And so there was an override of the local member because that project, the city as a whole was going to benefit from approving that project. And that is why we voted, we voted up that way. You know, there was another project in in Harlem, in Councilmember Richardson's district, and she was opposed to that project, the 145 project, and she was opposed to that project because of gentrification. The AMIs was not conducive. At the time there was a sentiment that developer was not being honest with what he wanted, and the council was going to side with that member. And so for everyone that's listening here, what I'm trying to explain is we believe in member deference, but when a council member wants to stop a project, just saying no, I don't want it, it's not good enough. You have to come and explain why you're no and how this is going to have a negative effect in your community. And 99% of the time we side with the member.
I think that's great. And that's provides a lot of clarity, particularly because I think a lot of folks in the community, they think that member deference means they have veto power. I think that that's very clear. It's, having a good reason for doing anything is important. And so we're going to move on a little bit to a question in the chat box about how can we promote more green and more resilient buildings? Climate change is real. We know it is. And we're seeing more flash flooding and more things of that. How can we further incentivize developers or even NYCHA or other large scale developments to really take on resiliency measures in their development plans? And then how can we also retrofit existing properties to ensure that South Bronx, Soundview, places of that sort aren't underwater in 5 years?
Yeah, so as we're building housing, and I'm very proud of this council that I'm in, they're extremely environmental friendly. Their thought process is how can we use more solar panels, and so how can, as we build these affordable housing units or even commercial strips, how do we build green roofs on top of these buildings? Infrastructure. Our infrastructure is dilapidated. Our infrastructure in terms of our piping, our sewage, in some communities is over 100 years old, and so we are putting the pressure on the Department of Environmental Protection, number one, to first ensure that the sewage lines and the catch basins are clean, especially when there are storms, because that's where most of the flooding is coming from. And number two, as we are developing in different communities, and you're bringing in more housing, meaning you're bringing in more people, that means that their infrastructure, their piping, their sewage, their water main lines are going to be used more often. They need to be replaced with new state-of-the-art infrastructure, piping. I think that would go a long way. And then finally, for those developers, there's many buildings in our communities that are much older. And in order for you to keep the affordability, they would have to apply for what they do is apply for what's called an Article 11. And Article 11 allows you, it gives you tax breaks and so that you can keep the rents low. But the incentives is that there's funding that gets attached to that building so that the owner of the building can create more capital and give that building an uplift. And what we are encouraging the developers is when they are giving their buildings an uplift to look at options such as solar panels, green roofs, installation, so that you can keep the heat inside the buildings. It's all, environmentally friendly. It's a different mindset that we have in this council.
Great. I think that's super important, particularly as we take on resiliency. And I know that even in the industrial sectors, there are a lot of folks who are taking it really seriously. For example, Manhattan Beer, Oak Point Properties, they're planting greenways and things like that to really shore up resiliency over there, at least temporarily, while we come up with a broader citywide plan.
Yeah, and I'm happy you brought that up. You have the Manhattan Beer last summer. We did a ribbon cutting on. They purchased a few electric trucks so that as they're delivering their products throughout the city, it's environmentally friendly. And I want to go back. I know I spoke on this earlier. The importance of giving the Hunts Point Produce Market a new facility. If you've never been to the markets, if you've been to the markets, you would understand. that they have outgrown their facility. And so in order to keep their produce cool, they need to be refrigerated. And because there's not enough space, they are using tractor trailers who are running on diesel fuel to keep their produce in the appropriate temperature. And that is affecting our air quality in the South Bronx. I'm being born and raised here, as proud as I am, one of the cons is I suffer from asthma. My 8-year-old son suffers from asthma as well. I have to walk around with my asthma pump wherever I go, because I never know when I'm going to get a trigger and my asthma is going to be triggered. And that has to do with my environment. And so that's why I'm so passionate about ensuring, in the time that I have in the council, ensuring that we get the funding necessary so that we can get the Hunts Point Produce Market a brand new facility.
That's great. I think it really underscores New York City's need to invest. I think that's wonderful, and also for our state and federal partners to take on the yeoman's task of ensuring that we can continue to be here for a very, very long time. There's a very specific question in the chat box, but I'm just going to take it out a little bit and make it just a little bit more general, largely because I'm not an expert on this. They're speaking of an affordable property in Queens Village. I know not the Bronx, but it's in Queens. We're grateful that people from Queens are joining us today. And it's about financing and the financing dynamic with HUD, and how to engage with HUD on a DDA status. I'm unfamiliar with what a DDA is. However, how would you recommend to engage with the federal government? Let's just take it out a step and just say, how do we attract the feds to a certain project, or whether it's a single affordable property development or a broad scale economic development project, let's say, for example, Hunts Point or the Sheridan Expressway. How would you recommend to engage with the federal government on that?
Yeah, so I see that question was posed by Barry Kessler. Barry, I would love to have more of a conversation with you to get more information. I'm not familiar with the DDA that you are referring to, but my office, if you reach out, I would like to learn more about that and see if I can, get you the information that you need. In terms of HUD, look, we're very blessed that we have Congress and individual members of Congress that represent us who have their fingers on the have their fingers on the pulse here. And I'm referring mostly to my Congressman Richie Torres, my former colleague. I speak to Congressman Torres often about the AMI structure that is set up by the federal government, which is HUD. If you notice, and I was reading some of the comments, individuals were talking about affordable housing. It's not really affordable. And, you're right. It can improve. It can get better. And there's been conversations and some ideas on how we can improve it. You have to understand that it's the federal government, HUD, who sets the AMI structure. And unfortunately, HUD has combined the city of New York with Westchester County and other surrounding counties. And because, for example, Westchester County is they're areas where their cost of living is much higher. And so because their incomes are much higher. So if you're compounding the city of New York, Westchester County, and the other counties that have much higher income, the average AMI altogether is much higher. And I believe that for 2022, the average AMI in the city of New York, based on that formula, is in the 90,000s, which is totally out of whack or out of line with what reality here with the city of New York. In my conversations with Congressman Torres, I have recommended that number one, the city of New York be given its own AMI structure, and Westchester County should have their own. Number two, we should look at communities. Maybe we can look at communities or community boards. They should have their own AMI structure independently. You can have the different options, have one for the city of New York or have one individually for these particular communities so that we can build better. Now, one of the issues that we're having also is the subsidies. When you're building extremely low income, that means that you have to add more subsidies to these projects. That's why the mixed income model works best because you have higher incomes, there's less subsidies that you add to that one particular building. You can spread the wealth, and you can build you can build more affordable housing elsewhere. So going back to HUD plays a major role in how we build. Most of our funding that we get is from the state and from the federal government, and all that funding for housing comes from HUD. So it's about open communication, having these dialogues with our Congress delegation, because they are representatives. They're the ones who, hold HUD accountable to ensuring that they are assisting us in building housing throughout the city of New York.
Great, thank you so much. There's a question from Anthony Crusoe. Anthony's a local architect in the Bronx and Harlem. And he says, recognizing the work and change that has come about through city programs and processes with affordable housing completed and pipelined, are there any actions that can be taken as of right, like today, with existing zoning, building code, underutilized FAR, and existing vacancies that can help alleviate the lack of social infrastructure? So for example, daycares or a greater variety of commercial options, perhaps incorporating street vendors into a brick and mortar. Are there any zoning triggers or any programs that can be pulled so the developing community, so the architectural community can start presenting these as options for their clients or for city-led projects?
Yeah, I know that the City Planning Commission, under the leadership of Chair Grodnick, now my former colleague, is working on proposing changes, some land use changes at the moment. Can't speak on it much because it has not been presented, but I do know that there has been conversations about creating housing for artists. We did something similar to that in the WECO projects, the Bronx Commons, I believe that's called. So yeah, those conversations are being had. I know that with this whole asylum, what's happening with the asylum seekers, if you notice in the press conference that the mayor had a few weeks ago, he spoke about canceling certain land use provisions. And so I believe that there are conversations that we're having with city planning on how to reviewing old city planning land use or laws and seeing how we update them given the times that we're living in now. So I'm sorry, I believe, Anthony, I don't have a direct answer for you, but we'll leave our information in the Dropbox. I would love to have a conversation with you if you would like to, so that I can get some of your ideas on what you would recommend.
Councilmember, I appreciate that. It may not have been a direct answer, but it was an honest answer. And I know that you're very, very good at giving honest answers. So this is a similar thread to the previous, and then we'll move into our final questions. On the same note, legalizing basement apartments. There was a lot of talk about doing this under the prior administration, and then, we've seen, due to the climate change, flooding of basement apartments and deaths that were associated with that, not just in New York City, but nationwide. Is there any type of pilot project slated for the Bronx that would deal with basement apartments and how to bring, safe units online? Is there anything that you think in the pipeline, or is that a kind of a wait and see holding pattern?
No, that's a good question. I know that in the last council, there was, I believe it was Councilmember Espinal, who was working on legalizing the basement apartments. Look, all options are on the table, given the housing crisis that we have. Am I a supporter of legalizing basement apartments? Absolutely. You get housing, you stimulate the economy, right? And you help the landlords or the homeowners, right? But we need to ensure that we do it in a safe way. When Ida hit, we saw something that's unprecedented. We've seen flash floodings, but not the way Ida came in, overnight and just flooded apartments, and lives were lost because there was no means of egress to leave, and the infrastructure just did not support it. And so I do know that the administration is looking at options on how to bring more, increase the housing stock, and legalizing of basement apartments is on top of the list. But they are trying to figure out how to do this in a safe manner, which again may mean that some capital work need to be done in that basement apartment to withstand flooding should something happens. the end of the day, we want to build more housing, but we want to save lives. And that's what's key here.
Great, thank you. And then we have 3 more questions left, and then because I know I want to be aware of your time, and I know that you have a meeting that you're voting on some stuff today, I think, in land use.
Yeah, I have land use. I got to go to City Hall.
So in terms, similar line of thread that we've been talking about with affordable housing and income, and also proximity to business improvement districts. How can we as a borough attract more professional residents, either residents who grew up here and then they went away to college, but how do we get them to come back into the borough? How do we even get, some perhaps former colleagues in the council who may have, after they've done their tenure, they may have moved to North Carolina or wherever. How do we position the Bronx as being a borough for everyone, whether you are low income, whether you're middle income, whether you're high income, because it seems like that is like the secret sauce or the secret formula for a vibrant economic development strategy. How would you recommend us going about that?
What I've seen and have many conversations with my constituents, because they see me speaking on bringing in affordable housing, and they feel that many of their children who go to college and come back want to stay in their communities, but they just can't get into these units. They don't qualify based on income. Maybe they're making too much. Their income is too high, and so that's why I'm pushing my colleagues as we're building housing to try to adopt this mixed income model where you can add a higher AMI so that these working professionals can move into our communities. I have many teachers who live who work in my district who want to live in these communities, but their income is restrictive and it's difficult. And look, there's also an elephant in the room. Safety is an issue here in the city of New York as well. At times I don't feel safe walking through my streets, and I'm constantly speaking to my precinct commanding officers. I want to see more of a presence in our streets. But we also have an issue with mental health, and we're working with the Department of Health to see how we can increase, and the Department of Homeless Services to see how we can increase funding to bring these professionals in our streets. The notion of putting everyone in jail does not work. There are individuals who are creating havoc in our communities that have severe mental health issues, and they need the help that they need help, and so we need to figure out how to combine mental health and public safety in a safe manner. And I think that public safety is a big conversation. Individuals are concerned. There's small businesses that are closing shop because individuals. We also have to look at our bail laws, and I speak on this openly, and I know it may upset individuals. They are chronic shoplifters, and you have businesses that just cannot sustain if the same person continues to come in, shoplift, and then they're out a few hours later and they come back and do it again. You have big box stores that can afford it. You go to my Rite Aid, everything's in the shelf locked up. There was a time there was nothing there because shoplifting was just so rampant, and individuals would just come. It was a revolving door for them. So I think that the Bronx is hot right now. In terms of individuals want to build, businesses want to move in, but we need to keep our small businesses and sustain them. And we need to figure out how to protect these small businesses, whether it's through grants, whether it's through public safety, and in terms of building, as we continue to build housing, we need to recognize that you have individuals with higher incomes who want to stay in these communities, want access to these new buildings, and we should be able to build for everyone: homeless, low income, middle income, and working families.
Great, thank you. And then the last question before our final question of the morning, and this is selfishly, you have 2 business improvement districts in your district, and BIDS have proven that they can be reliable partners in economic development. But what are maybe 1 or 2 things that BIDS could be doing better? I've got the privilege to lead 3rd Avenue BID here in the South Bronx, but what are some things that BIDS could be doing better or be more active in the conversation on to promote our economic development?
I think I do have two bids. I have the Third Avenue bid and I have the Southern Boulevard bid. And you know, Michael, I use you as an example. You are what you want to see in an executive director in a bid. You're present. You're there every day. You know, you may, you know, you have issues. There are issues in Third Avenue, right? We have issues with street vendors. We have issues with drug abuse. We have issues with needles, right? The needle exchange programs, needles there. We have issues with shoplifting. It's a very busy intersection, but your presence is there, always ringing the bell. You know, I cannot always be on 139th Street and Third Avenue because I just have such a diverse district that requires attention. So by your presence there, ringing the bell, is constantly bringing these issues to my attention, to the attention of the local board, community board, the attention of the precinct, which will address those issues. And so for all you bid executive directors that are paying attention, you have to be present in order for you to make a difference in your bid. If you are not present, then you're not ringing the bell, issues are not going to get addressed. So my recommendation for those that are listening, you have to be present. Now, the bids play such a vital role. You know, being able to work directly with the executive director in the bids, being able to, number one, it provides an opportunity for cleaner streets, right? Bids provide that. It provides an opportunity for the businesses, small businesses that are present to stay thriving. City bureaucracy is real. And you're going to get a sanitation inspection. You're going to get Department of Consumer Affairs. Oh, there's a certain sign that's not posted. You're going to get a fine. Bids help you as a business to ensure that you are covered. And when you do need that representation, or you feel that there's an overzealous inspector, the bids are there to assist and help you navigate through that bureaucracy. So bids play such a vital role. And that's not to mention, you know, during the holidays, they uplift the community, the Christmas lights, you know, the coat drives that we do in Southern Boulevard, you know, and that is how the community stays alive and stays thriving. And they create jobs.
Thank you so much. And then we always like to end these with one question, which leaves us on a high note. But before I say it, it's not so much a question as it is a comment. What's your next step in public service? You can't quit on us now. And when that went up, I just want to let you know, council member, there were a lot of hearts and hand claps in the social media box. We know that you're still with us in the city council, but I think there's definitely a lot of people who want to see you around for a very long time. So you don't have to address it, but I just want to let you know that there are lots of fans of yours out here today that are supporting you.
Well, my next step is I'm up for re-election in June. So I'm focused on my re-election in June. And once once we're hopefully, we're successful in that. And then I will come out and figure out what my next step is. But I just want to tell everyone that has supported me throughout the 7 years that I've been in office, just thank you. This has been a dream job. It's a very difficult job. It's a public job. You're being scrutinized at every different level. Not just you, but your family and in my household, we're public servants, and including my 8-year-old son. I bring him with me everywhere, but it's more to show him that we can make a difference, and how to properly make a difference is being involved, whether it's an easy conversation or a tough conversation, just being present, saying, estamos presente. When the pandemic hit, businesses such as the Hunts Point Market stepped up. We fed over 65,000 families. And I had Aiden with me at every step of the way, giving back, just to show him the importance of giving back and how much of a need there is in our communities. So with that, I just want to say thank you. This has been a great ride. And I'm really enjoying the fact that I'm a Puerto Rican kid from the South Bronx, bringing change, not just to the South Bronx, but to the city as a whole in my capacity as land use chair. So I guess, we'll see what happens after, this election in June.
Thank you so much. And then we ended it with this final question, then Lisa for some closing remarks. If there's one thing that you're most hopeful about for the Bronx, what would it be?
It's something most hopeful for the Bronx. There's so many things.
I know. It's a tough question. Every person who comes on here gets stumped at that one at the end.
Yeah. Look, what I'm hopeful in the Bronx is that we as Bronxites continue to thrive. Communities that are struggling, we get them the resources that they need, so that we can continue to grow as a borough, and really, stimulate the economy, which creates jobs, which helps individuals, helps their self-esteem. And the reality is that when individuals have good paying jobs, it is in my perception that crime will reduce. People will care more about their communities because they want to live here. And that's really what I see that's really what I would like to see in the borough of the Bronx.
Excellent. Thank you. Lisa, do you have some closing remarks for us?
I do. I have to say that I'm sitting here, my head's not in the right place today, but this is probably one of the best conversations and honest conversations that we've had. And I really have to thank you because everything that you said about housing, the economic impact, it's just to me, it's always been about the communication, right? It's not the saying no or just having, you pinpointed it perfectly. When you don't want something, it's not just no or yes. It really is about sitting down and the best interest of a community as a whole, which is what we try to do here at the Chamber, right? So what I love to see moving forward is being able to not only help stimulate this economy even more, because we are hot right now, right? And we have to take advantage of that, is really focusing on keeping the business in the Bronx, doing the work with the Bronx, using the services of the Bronx. But your answers have been incredible, very uplifting. And I really have to thank you for joining us. You kind of made my morning here because it's positive, honest. It's not always all good when you have to be that honest, but it's a breath of fresh air because to your point, the bureaucracy and people hiding behind slogans doesn't work all the time. And our businesses and the economy and our households depend on honest, I'm going to say this in one, honest elected officials to do the right thing by us. And I want to thank you, Councilman Salamanca, for joining us this morning. And this conversation has really, truly been inspiring and eye-opening. So thank you for everything, your services, because I did see you, this fight of yours is not only in the council, I saw you take on when you were the district manager and community board, so you turned Hunts Point on its head. You were a force to be reckoned with, so I expect nothing less from you. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Salamanca. And for those who are listening and for those in the Chamber community, a recording of our coffee and conversations with Councilmember Salamanca will be provided this afternoon on the Chamber YouTube channel and also across all social media platforms. Couple of other announcements to close us out. November 8th will be our next Coffee and Conversations. At 10 a.m. we will host Councilmember Marjorie Velasquez. Also a reminder, November 8th is Election Day. So please go out and vote. The Irish have a saying, vote early and vote often. That only means you should vote once that day. Don't vote twice, unless you're a Republican, just kidding. But again, Election Day is November 8th. The next Coffee and Conversation is November 8th at 10 a.m. with Councilmember Marjorie Velasquez. Councilmember Salamanca, thank you so much for your leadership. We look forward to our continued relationship with you and your offices, and thank you to your entire team. For people who are interested in more information about the Chamber of Commerce, please contact us via membership at bronxchamber.org. If you are a small business who needs direct small business assistance, that means that we will come to you and won't just get an email. The Chamber team will actually go to your store. It's sbrn@bronxchamber.org. For all their information, please visit the website, www.bronxchamber.org. Again, thank you so much, Councilmember Salamanca, and good luck today at your Land Use Committee meeting. We wish you the best. Thanks so much.